We've got a prelim bout between Ricardo Ramos and Josh Culibao. This is an interesting fight because Josh Culibao is the local market guy. He's an Australian fighter, and he's taking on a Ricardo Ramos who is, a little bit younger than him, right? 29 years of age, so about a year younger. He's also going to be, 1 inch shorter, 5'9" tall, 72-inch reach, 1 inch of reach disadvantage. So pretty similar measurables for these guys in all categories. However, if you had to say, one guy gets an advantage, I would say slightly the anthropomorphics favor Kuya, Josh Culibao. But the other thing I want to note about a guy like Josh Culibao is he's a guy that I was higher on in the market for a long time. He came into the UFC and he was fighting Jalen Turner, and that was a death warrant, right? His manager signed him a death warrant to go out there and fight Jalen Turner. It was absolutely huge. And this guy was way inexperienced to be fighting Jalen Turner and also not big, right? Jalen Turner is a borderline welterweight, and this guy, Josh Culibao, is a featherweight, and he was out there fighting him. Looked like there was 2 weight classes between them, and he got cleaned up accordingly. But I said to myself after that fight, I was like, man, that was like a gang initiation. They got him in, and now he's going to go out there and get wins. He's going to surprise people in this company. And I bet him in his next fight. He's fighting Charles Jourdain. He's a plus 365 underdog, guys. And for the life of me, I could not believe that he did not win that decision. But admittedly, the draw was fine. That was fair. But you go back and look at the scorecards, just comical scorecards in that fight. But in any case, Josh Culibao, for my money, went out there and fought very hard, showed his mettle, showed his stuff, and really proved he's a guy that can go out there and overperform people's expectations at times. And that's what I like about him, right? But now he's a favorite, right? Now he's in a different position where he's 1-1 as a UFC favorite, minus 29.5% ROI. So not very good numbers. And he lost his last fight in a similar odds range against Danny Silva. And that's not a great look. Danny Silva missed weight for the contest, but he's making a quick turnaround here, less than a year, that he's been out of the octagon. So that's good to see. But he went out there and he won as an underdog against Sung Woo Choi. Right, that was like his big claim to fame. He won as a pick'em against Melsik Bagdasaryan, but he lost the first round in that fight and was able to go out there and get an opportunistic submission in the second. He beat Shah Yalan, but Shah Yalan is just not a very high-quality fighter, with no disrespect. And then Lerone Murphy, he was plus 135 there, and he got beat up in that fight. I think if they reline that fight, it would probably be plus 200 or so for Josh Culibao. So he's a tough guy. He goes out there and scraps. But he's definitely a guy that has some vulnerabilities, right? Some clear deficiencies in his game and some things that hold him back from being a huge favorite as far as I see it, right? And you guys can disagree, but I just think of him as a guy that I don't think of as a big favorite long term. He's a guy that I prefer to look for in these underdog type of opportunities if possible. You look at Culibao, he's not putting together a positive striking differential. He's about even on strikes through his UFC sample size. His accuracy is 42%, 56% defense. Those are both numbers that compete very well with a guy like Ramos, and he's going to be the bigger guy. So if this fight plays out purely on the feet, you would think that Josh Culibao is the guy that should have an advantage. I think he's the more proven knockdown threat as well. Let me just go back and check what the knockdown rates are for these individuals so I can make sure I'm giving you guys great information. And we'll take a swig of the old coffee as well. So cheers to you guys if you got one. Lerone Murphy was able to secure a knockdown against Josh Culibao, and that's the only one that's ever gone against him so far in the UFC. He was able to secure one against Charles Jourdain. He was able to secure 2 against Sung Woo Choi. He just has not been able to convert them so far into, a finish. So I think that that's something he's got to work on in this, iteration, right? Trying to go out there and find a way. Hey, can I go out there and convert finishes? Can I go out there and be a guy that puts people away? And we've seen that Ricardo Ramos, he's looked good on the feet in his recent fights, right? He went out there in his last fight and he landed some good shots against Julian Erosa for a second. He was looking okay, went for a couple takedowns, and as soon as he started wrestling, he just put his head right into the guillotines. I called Erosa by round 1 front choke in that fight. I had said Ricardo Ramos just was grappling so soft in his last fight with Charles Jourdain, and that's true, guys. Charles Jourdain has a great guillotine, but he got it once, and Ramos got out, and Ramos got put right back in it, and he didn't even try to get out, I felt, the second time. And for me, that's just soft, right? Like, It's one thing to get caught where you get caught and there's nothing you can do. That happens. It's fighting, right? It's a two-man sport. It's a two-woman sport. Somebody catches you in a bad position, nothing you can do about it. But if you get caught and you don't try to get out, demerit for me. I don't like that when I'm trying to back you, when I'm trying to bet on you, when I'm looking for those opportunities. Danny Chavez as a win, not very good quality. Zubaira Tukhugov loss, fine, but a bunch of other guys have come in and beat Zubaira Tukhugov and have, performed ably. I do agree with Thomas. Roasted just sub C-Rod. That's not the worst look. I do think that was kind of an underperformance by C-Rod. I'll be frank about that. I thought he had gassed out in the first round. And I think he kind of learned there that he needs to be at 135, frankly. But came here late. Are you going with Ramos or Kuya? I have not decided yet, my friend. So I appreciate you asking. I will try and use this rambling thought process to come up with an answer for you by the end of this. I like Culibao to win on the feet here, says my guy Champ Bets. Although I do have to worry if it goes to the ground. I think Kulibao's losses as of recent are going to age very well with Lerone and Danny Silva. I actually agree with you, my brother. And I do think that Josh Culibao, he came to the UFC as a guy that had some amateur experience. He wasn't the world's highest level fighter. I think the one thing that holds him back is his athletic pedigree. He's just not the greatest athlete you've ever seen. But can he fight? Yeah, I think he can fight. I think he knows what he's doing. The Ricardo Ramos side, he's 7-5 in the UFC. Things have been kind of falling off recently for him. He beat Bill Algeo in a very close nip-tuck decision where he was able to out-wrestle him, outmaneuver him. And Bill Algeo, that's kind of been a little bit of his fatal flaw, right? Is if you can keep the cardio for all 15 minutes, you can out-wrestle him, right? It's definitely been a path to victory for people in the past against Bill. And again, so he beats Danny Chavez, Bill Algeo, Eduardo Grigori, Journey Newson. I mean, none of those wins have aged great. I think the best part of his career was back in 2018 and prior. He beat Kyung-Ho Kang via split decision, very close fight, very close grappling exchanges with a quality guy, so that's nice. He knocked out my guy, Ayman Zahabi, and that's the reason why we've gotten great prices on Ayman Zahabi ever since, right? But if you look at that fight, he hit the spinning back elbows. He was a little bit meme-like in his offense at the time. So now I just think that he's gotten a lot softer over time with how he reacts when he gets put in bad situations, when he gets put in bad positions. I don't know that Culibao necessarily is the guy to put him there. If you look at his grappling chops, he's only 1-0 career to the sub, and he submitted Melsik Bagdasaryan, who's a kickboxer, and it was a pretty opportunistic sub at that. But I think he's a purple belt at minimum in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I'd have to go check. I'm pulling up his Instagram right now. And these are the kind of things I check over the course of my research process, in addition to watching the film, just trying to have an understanding of people's belt rank, how long they've been training, what their physicality and their strength and conditioning and things like that look like. So I'm not seeing immediately a picture of him, training in a gi or anything like that. But I believe, if my memory serves, that he's a brown or purple belt level jiu-jitsu practitioner. From memory. So he's not a bad jiu-jitsu player, right? He's a guy that has an idea of what he wants to do down there, and he's very aggressive. However, on the other side, Ricardo Ramos is a much more proven submission threat, 7-3 overall in his career to the submission. The front headlock, the guillotine choke has been a constant occurring problem for him, right? I mentioned the last two most recent losses, but also Manny Vasquez back in the day in the LFA was able to submit him via rear naked choke in the first round. And if you look at Culibao, his one win via submission was a rear naked choke. So I think that Culibao is going to be looking to land power shots on the feet. I think he's going to be looking to dissuade this guy from coming forward. And I think that ultimately, his best path to victory is landing those big kill shots and, putting a hurting on this guy or hopping on his back, locking him in a front headlock. You got to do something, explosive here and really prove yourself to be UFC level. I think on the other side for Ricardo Ramos, you want to try and, emulate the success that you saw from Danny Silva, 4 takedowns to 0. Lerone Murphy, 3 takedowns to 0. Sungwoo Choi, 1 takedown to 0. Shayilan Nurdenbeki, 2 takedowns to 0. This guy, Josh Culibao, doesn't have any takedowns, right? He had that one opportunistic submission, but he didn't really have a lot else to offer, and I do think that that's a potential problem, right? You look at Ricardo Ramos, somebody else pointed out in the chat, great point, that he missed weight for the Austin Lingo fight by 9 pounds, really unprofessional stuff. And he was injured when he was supposed to fight Danny Henry. So he's dealt with a lot of stuff outside the octagon. You look at the measurables for the fight, we mentioned off the top, Ricardo Ramos is 29 years of age, but it looks like he's got more fight miles on him. He does fit a couple systems for me, though, in terms of the fact he's an underdog in this fight. And he's coming in as a dog, despite the fact he's the younger fighter with more professional experience, more fights at the UFC level. And he's a guy that has a diverse set of skills, right? He has the ability to go out there and wrestle people to a decision, which is a way that we just saw Danny Silva beat Josh Culibao. We know that he could go out there and submit guys, right? He's shown that in the past as well. And then he could land some devastating shots on the feet. He knocked out my guy, Ayman Zahabi, like I mentioned. So I think that there's, some credit to Ricardo Ramos as a potential underdog play this weekend. I think that for Culibao, the step in the direction he needs is sprawl brawl, keep it upright in this fight. Be very decisive with your output, land, make sure you're connecting with your power shots. And I think you can break this kid and dissuade him. So great fight. I do think that Thomas made a good point here. VB says Ramos been checked out on his career. I kind of agree. That's what I'm saying. But for me, I just think that one danger is, realizing if you're Ramos, hey, I need this win for my career, could come out here and sell out, look for that early victory. And we just don't really know what we're getting with Josh Culibao from a defensive grappling standpoint against these top guys, because most of the guys he's fought haven't really looked to take him to a defensive grappling position. And I think that that's going to be an interesting note, right? We talked about the fact he's been taken down. He's conceded a few submission attempts along the way. 1 submission attempt to Danny Silva, 2 submission attempts to Lerone Murphy, 3 submission attempts to Charles Jourdain, 3 submission attempts to, what's his name? Jalen Turner. So he hasn't been submitted yet. Yeah, absolutely. Hats off to him. But eventually that bill's going to come due if you keep allowing people to wrap you in submission holds, right? Eventually you're not going to be able to get out. You're going to make a critical mistake. You're going to be hurt when you get put in it, and you're going to get finished. So I think Kuya probably has the better cardio. I think he's probably got a little more toughness, a little more heart. But again, skill for skill, I think it's a lot closer, than maybe the odds would suggest. I can't remember if Josh has good ground game, at least to get up, because Algio took him down 8 times. Yeah. Thanks for the takedown points against Culibao. He's not a parlay piece for sure. Yeah, I think that's the danger with him, right? When you're looking at potential holes in the game, I think Culibao just doesn't have as much offensive wrestling, and the defensive wrestling has been a flaw, right? So something to keep in the back of our mind. But I do think he can go out there and win the fight. I haven't liked what I've seen from Ramos lately. Wouldn't be passionate about backing him, certainly with the performance we saw last time, the soft taps, I think, in the last couple of fights. But ultimately, those are better grapplers on paper than a guy like Culibao. So let's see what they have in store.